All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back Pod post-game edition. First one for the NBA season, and thank God it's our last one. I am Marcos Conan and and beside me here hosting as always has been the Jet Reds. How are you, brother? I mean, I'm in shambles. I'm just a lot happening.
Yeah, no, I'm relieved, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm happy, I'm confused. I'm feeling all the emotions right now. It's interesting.
Yep. So, as we talked about yesterday, for those who tuned in, we were previewing this play-in matchup with the Dallas Mavericks, the Kings. The final score had just ended. The Mavericks won 120 to 106, and it did not feel like that at all, which was weird because, when we think about this game and how it started, we were playing early, but we're in the lead after one, and then the second quarter happens, and that was pretty much that was it. That was the story of the game. Was the second quarter we got outscored 44-19, and that's just been the story. We outplayed, if we look at just point totals throughout the four quarters, we outplayed the Mavericks every other quarter except that nasty second quarter, and that's I don't know how many times I feel like it's on repeat that, oh yeah, we talk about this Kings team plays well for, 2.5, 3 quarters, and they always give up a clunky quarter that derails a game. And in a one-off situation, there wasn't going to be an opportunity for them to come back. And you look at these stats, DeRozan 33 points. It didn't really feel that way. Levine only had 20 points. Domas had 11. He was 11 and 13 and 5, but he had five turnovers in this game. It was sloppy ball. The Mavericks wanted it more than the Kings did, and I'm glad that they did, because this was you had texted me, this was a 9-10 matchup. This was a 9-10 matchup for sure with the way it was looking. This game was ugly, and I'm just glad it's over. How what were your main takeaways from this game? Anything like in terms of maybe you were hoping a certain thing went different, or was this kind of once things got going, you kind of saw this coming?
So this was kind of the biggest concern I had going into the game was when you push the pace, when this Kings team pushes the pace, they tend to turn the ball over. And once they start turning the ball over enough, they start slowing things down, and that's when you see that stagnant, isolation basketball being played by them. And so, in this game, they have 18 turnovers. They were forced by the Mavericks and by themselves to slow down and start being a little more, I guess, methodical. But the biggest thing that stood out to me, dude, is going to be the biggest topic all summer long. We need a point guard, because there was absolutely no good facilitation of the rock for the Sacramento Kings tonight. And it's embarrassing. I mean, the Mavericks don't have a point guard either, but at the very least, they were able to, take care of the ball and value every possession. So this is a tough game. This is a tough game to swallow. Our big three was pretty mid three here in this last game. DeMar DeRozan did his thing, put up 33 points, was fairly efficient. But, unfortunately, when he has a really good game, that typically means the Kings team in general didn't have a good game.
Yeah, and I don't know. With this one, it was tough because literally the second Clay hit his second three, I was like, well, this might be a bad look. And that was the thing with this game is we did need the thing with this team in general all season is we always need things to go right in games to we can't create our own momentum. We need kind of things to fall into our lap a little bit. And we could just see once things got going for Dallas, it was over. In the sense of we never really had any true momentum in this game, and we played physical. I'm not doubting our effort, but too many times a blown assignment on defense, miscommunications. We're just giving up. They're just driving into the paint uncontested until they get stopped 5 feet from the basket. There was no whatever defense we were trying. The Mavericks had an answer, and it didn't even look like the Kings knew what they were doing out there, and it was embarrassing. And they gave off, the Mavericks played big, and we kind of talked about how they were going, they had the opportunity to do that and they've been playing that way. But it really gave off like us playing the Pelicans last year type of vibe, where that size just got in the way. We were just not able to handle it. And it's not like it was just disappointing. And, you gotta, I don't really, there's no one you can really give a shout out to in this game. You had guys who play hard. DeMar played okay. Devin Carter was doing fine, trying to give effort. And at first, Keegan was giving an effort. I mean, Keegan's defense was there, blocking Davis twice, even, a few times, even when the game was kind of out of hand at that point. So the effort was there, but you could tell turnovers, the certain shots just not going in, us making terrible passes. Like Levine was passing the ball way too much. He was trying to distribute way too much. It just felt like it didn't feel like we had a clear and concise plan in this game. And then again, that's been the case since the All-Star break. That's been the case since Doug Christie's taken over, and no shots at him. It's just that we are not an NBA team right now. We are just a team in flux. And crappy way to end the season. I think, for a lot of fans, myself included, we thought we had a really good chance against this Mavs team, even if they were healthy. But, I do wonder if we had Laravia and Monk, how different it would be, how much, how we would have been able to attack them a little bit differently, and that experience that Monk brings to the table. But that being said, I mean, we took a really disappointing loss in front of our fans. And this was just kind of the way this season was, going to end at some point. And
exactly,
it's just, now we don't get the benefit of anything, most likely. So it's just like, we got here for what? And, that's just kind of been how I feel about this game. And now that the game's over, it's like, okay, now I can unload all this from the season and we can kind of move on and move forward.
Yeah, I think the part that I'm stuck on the most right now, and I'll be stuck here until the draft is over, and I don't know, we'll see if I'm stuck on that for years to come. But thing I'm most stuck on right now is, you made the play in, like you just said, for what? You got eliminated in the first game, right? And not only that, you have essentially like a 5% or less chance at retaining your lottery pick. So what the hell was the point in making the play in if you were just going to fall flat like this, put on this kind of a effort in front of your fan base? I tweeted out early on in this game just that or rather at halftime, that the effort that this Kings team was playing with was embarrassing, and it's absolutely not a representation of the kind of commitment that this fan base shows to this team on a yearly basis. I mean, the fans have more heart this season than this entire team did all year long. And I get there were so many changes from top to bottom. I get that. There's a lot of uncertainty in Sacramento right now. But when you look at that arena tonight, that was a sold out stadium. Sold out. And that's the kind of effort you put on. So frustrating. Kind of glad the season's over. It's just frustrating it didn't end 3 games sooner, and we could have been talking about having a better chance at holding on to a pick and holding on to a little bit of hope for the future.
Right, and our future screams, teams are going to get better next year, and teams are going to get healthier next year, and there's no guarantee that we even sniff the play-in next year. So that's the reality the Kings are in, and it's a crappy reality. I mean, I'm just looking at the box score in this game, and I mean, we had the turnovers. It was 18-9, and outside, like, those really were the main differences. Just like they were attacking the paint. I was trying to see,
dude, their paint touches was insane. They would get downhill so easily against the Kings, and every team's been doing this all year long. But especially in this game, they would get downhill in a half-court scenario. They would get downhill on the Sacramento Kings, get into the paint, and that was the first time that we would show a body to somebody when they were 2 feet from the rim. You cannot expect to win a basketball game like that. And the box score represents that when you look at the free throw attempts that the Mavericks had. The Mavs shot 26 free throws and took care of business at the stripe, making 24 of those. So You can't sit here and say the refs were dog when you let guys willingly walk into the paint before you even show a body to them.
Yeah, it really felt like, especially I thought it was funny when the fans were saying, I didn't know if I was hearing this correctly because I had the volume a little bit lower, but they were saying the refs you suck chant, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, it felt like a vintage classic Kings game,
Yeah.
like when they're screaming refs you suck.
No,
Because
and like the timing of it was great because it was a bad call. I get that. But at the same time, it would have made more sense to just shout, Kings, you suck, because the
yeah,
effort that the refs were putting in was a little more than what the Kings were showing. Just
so
crazy, man.
yeah, so it's frustrating season, to when we really think about it, there's not much more we can say about this game. It was a poor effort. It wasn't our night, and we kind of knew that that's the possibility in these one-off games. If you don't show up, you're going to get kicked out. So, the Kings have been removed from the playoffs altogether. So we finished with a record of 40-42. We finished ninth in the Western Conference, and lost in the play-in. And that's once the past 3 years. It's just 2022 we made the playoffs. 2023 we win the first play-in against Golden State, so that felt like a win in general. But then we lose in round two, and then this year we're just losing the first game of the play-in. So now it's just like we're trending backwards. But I want to talk about just we got to give this season a recap for what it was, and I want to talk about the guy specifically because we have spent some time. I think the funny part is in like 2023, it did really feel like we were more analytical with how we discussed this Kings team. And this year was just more like we see the product that's on the floor, and
Right.
it's just not good. Um, but we want to try to take a look at some positives here. So before we each came up with an MVP and a most improved player on this roster this year. We didn't want to do the whole shebang of awards because this team doesn't deserve that kind of respect. So let's just start with our most improved player. And Ben, I will give the floor to you. Who this season, and I'm pretty sure this is the most obvious answer that we have, but I don't think it's wrong. Who do you have as your most improved player this year?
It's Keon Ellis by a mile. Keon, he took that step that we wanted to see in year two, and you can argue it was more of a step than we expected. His offense came together. He had multiple games with 8, 9 threes. And obviously defensively, he was in the top five in like deflections, steals. He was an all around incredible. He made an incredible jump that I don't think a lot of us could have anticipated. So I'm giving my most improved player to Keon. I know I'm almost positive you have the same guy because I think you can look around, the rest of the fan base, and we would all feel the same about Keon right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keon Ellis, definitely the most improved player this year. He took the big jump, like you said. Has just gotten better every single time he plays. I do think what he brings to the table is valuable and something that I'm glad we have on this roster for the next couple of years before things get more complicated. He is a building block for sure. And I think that he will have the opportunity to get even better within a more expanded role next year, depending on who's coaching him. That will definitely be the big key. But I think he's shown all the attributes of making him a valuable player, and he definitely did what he had to do this year to keep this team afloat on the defensive side of the ball. Him and Keegan Murray were our two best defensive players, and they did everything they could to keep this, to be the glue for the defense. And they did what they could. So yeah, Keon definitely was my most improved player. So this is going to be an interesting one because there's a lot of ways that you and I can take the most valuable player on this iteration of the Sacramento Kings for the 2024-2025 roster. And so, Ben, who would you name as your MVP this year?
Jeremy Lamb, take a bow, brother. No. This was a tough award because the season was a mess. But if there was one point where you can point to more consistency around the team than others, I would point my finger towards DeMar DeRozan. And and the reason I say that is just, one of the things we talked about this last offseason with DeMar when he was acquired was he's going to be able to get us a bucket when we need one the most. And especially after De'Aaron Fox departed out of Sacramento, the Kings were searching for buckets a lot. And one of the bright points for the Kings was seeing him move up through the scoring lists and continue to just do what he's been doing for so many years in the league, and just being that consistent player. And I can honestly tell you, he won and kept us competitive in more games than he lost us. Yes, he absolutely lost us some ball games by shooting the way he does, but this is the gamble you take with a player like him, and it has worked out for so many years, and it's why he's been a top player on so many teams. Like, he's absolutely my MVP for this season, because I don't think I can point to another player and say that they were more consistent throughout the entirety of the season. And he also played 77 games.
Right, that was another aspect of it. This season, was kind of a bummer injury wise, and I think that had Domas, somehow, was still the NBA's double double leader. Third consecutive year, puts him in really historic company. We kind of glossed over that on the last pod. Domas really did have another efficient season, but I, if I had to pick an MVP, it would be De'Aaron Fox. I'm just kidding. It's not, but I, as much as, honestly, based off of what he did in the beginning of the year, where there was a window for him to be there. But I
Fully
agree.
agreed.
I do think, I do think DeMar DeRozan was the most consistent. And again, like you said, he won us a few games, and he was the reason we were able to stay in those important games. He was a very, his clutch numbers are, I don't have them on me, but I'm sure he's going to be up there with how many fourth quarter points he scored. We were in a lot of clutch situations, and he definitely capitalized on those situations. And all the hype around DeMar in this offseason, he made the decision to come to Sacramento, to come to this team that looked like it had a very bright future in front of them. And, he came in here and was a solid veteran for a lot of these guys. And, even if it was just a 1-year rental and we allow him, when we free him and put him in a better situation, I think it was good. The DeMar DeRozan experience was definitely an experience, and maybe not the one that we were hoping for, but definitely, for this season, he was kind of the bright spot. So I will give my MVP to him as well.
Yeah, and this is a tough award to give out right now because everything feels so low. And I don't think you can give it to other guys around this team. And I think most of it just has to do with the amount of change that this team saw throughout the season. Yeah, we've been dogging on the Kings this entire episode. We've been dogging on them for a number of months now. But one thing that I will kind of continue to say here and there, and maybe I'll leave it off with this last one, is props to Doug Christie and this, these players pulling together and playing as, put together as they could through the rest of the season. This was a season with so many changes. It was disastrous in so many different ways. And it just, at no point did you feel like this team was completely out of the picture. They continued to put themselves in a competitive, stance and position themselves in a way where they can continue to fight for, what they believed was a spot they wanted to be in. So, it was a tough season. The MVPs and the MIPs are named, for the BTB squad here, but man, this is going to be a crazy, crazy offseason.
Yeah, a lot of turnover is going to happen. I know there's going to be reports of, Domas wants out, or what, all these trade rumors we're going to see. And it's going to be one to pay attention to. And again, no future draft picks in terms of this season. So unless we make a trade into the draft this year, it's going to be a quiet offseason in acquiring young talent. So it's going to be, it's just going to be interesting. And I do think that, one thing this does in a whole half glass full approach is, despite the nonsense, next year we can kind of go back as Kings fans to having no expectations for this team, whether it's, good. I feel weird saying this, but whether it's good or bad, you kind of, the pressure that this team has been under in the past few years to succeed and get into the playoffs, like there is going to be an element of it's always an element when you're talking about the Sacramento Kings, but they're going to fly as low on the radar as possible. Even the most dysfunctional teams like the Mavericks were getting all the attention tonight. It wasn't even about the Kings tonight. It was, they were spending half the game talking about the Luka trade. So I'm like, all right, this is great. So it's like, no matter what happens next year, the bar is going to be back to being at the normal Kangs level and seeing if we can get above that and stay competitive next year. So, honestly, it does temper my expectations personally. For all you optimists out there, I hope that something better comes along and that maybe we're in a better position going into next year.
And there's nothing wrong with being optimistic. Everybody has their approaches.
Yeah, like we were very optimistic when, even when things weren't going well, when this team was coming together, we too were optimists. We just weren't vocal, we didn't have the pot at the time. So hopefully we have a successful team at some point during this podcast. But
maybe it's us, bro. Maybe we're cursed. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it kind of feels like that.
I know, right? I mean, the only number one's going to be winning over here. So it's tough. And you texted me, you kind of called me out on this because I was like, well, hey, if they lose tonight, at least I got my Friday night, I don't lose anything. And he's like, oh, spoken of like someone who's already watched their team win a title. And I was like, you know what? There is an element of like, I was so high on and focused on the Eagles this year that there was a little bit of a, man, like I forgot how mid this team kind of was just all season.
Yeah, and see my side of things, the Niners were so mid all season long that I was itching to pivot over to the Kings and be full time. And guess what? That didn't work out either. So here we are.
You were so excited going in. You're like, dude, this Niners season's over. Let's get on the Kings. Dude. Like, it's gonna be great. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this year, what a wild ride. And we know it's not gonna end anytime soon. But again, not much more we can say. I think final thoughts is for me is just that like overall just a disappointing season. Being a below 500 team, but just barely, there was some highs and there was some lows. There was some good win streaks. There was some good moments and some moments where you're like, okay, if they can capture some of this and some of this and some of this and find a way to put it all together, then maybe we can have a legitimate, chance next year. And, it all starts with what, the first move that's going to happen is that matters of consequences. Who is going to be coaching the Kings next year? And if there's any changes in the front office happening, we don't know what's happening with this team anymore. We don't know. With all the dysfunction, we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to be the first domino to drop. We don't know if it's a player getting traded or leaving, or if it is going to be the coaching change first. So, it'll be interesting to see who, if it's not Doug, who does coach. And I'm sure we'll hear tons of news on what our options are going to be. There's more options than we can probably think of off the top of our head right now. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but disappointing season. I don't know how excited I am for this off season, but we'll still do the regular work and hopefully, good news comes our way at some point.
I'm going to pivot off what you said there at the very end. I am excited for this offseason because our expectations don't just have to start low at the start of next year. Our expectations can start low right now, and they can surprise us at any point. But ultimately, dude, there's going to be a lot to talk about. So, you guys still stay tuned to our pod because we're going to break it down every single week. It may not be a King segment every single week, but we're going to touch on them as often as need be. And there's going to be a lot happening this offseason. I have an idea of what the first move might be, but I'm not ready to say it out loud. And it could happen as soon as tomorrow. And all I'll get to say next week is I told you so. But aside from that, you'll probably hear what I think the first move is going to be soon. So stay tuned, guys. Stay with us. This was an awful season, but we appreciate you guys for sticking with us, Kings fans. And we will continue to be by your side through the toughest of times, the toughest and darkest of times here in Sacramento.
That was very well said. And that could not have been more true. No matter what, we can be pessimistic as we want season by season, but we still are, degenerates and still watch this game. We still watch the games. We don't care. We will watch every L that we see, and we're always along for the ride. We are dedicated Kings fans, and that'll never change. So, like Ben said, we're gonna touch up on news as we hear about it and offer up our off-season takes, maybe things that we want. for the offseason. But next week we were debating. We were debating kind of doing a playoff pod on the fly, but no, we're going to do it next week. Probably game ones of series, probably game twos might have been recorded by the time that the first rounds have been played, but we are going to have our picks prepared. We're going to come up with those probably tomorrow, or actually on Friday after the final playoff seedings announced, and we'll have those ready to go. We'll kind of zoom by the first round so then we don't kind of cheat and everything like that. But we will have our winners picked by our next pod, and we will do that and a draft pod. It's going to be a crazy time. It's going to be a lot of fun, guys. But a lot of fun off-season stuff moving forward. Now that we're back officially in the off-season for all of our teams, so it's always a fun time to be here and kind of get a mental breather of trying to figure out, oh, maybe we can talk about this week, and versus like having to talk about another loss. So it's nice.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, y'all. So we're going to leave that off here. This was the Behind the Back Pod post-game edition for the Sacramento Kings, the first and only one of the season, and it ends in disappointment. But we can push on from that. Let's keep on with the good vibes. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com for all y'all watching us on YouTube. All of the links to our socials are up above for all you audio listeners out there. The links to descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review. Follow the show. We appreciate all the love and support as we grow with you guys each and every day. Comment for you Kings fans out there. Comment who was your most valuable player, who your most improved player was, any highlights from the season that mattered to you guys that really stuck out, or if maybe we really are too jaded. Do you think that we have a good chance this offseason? So please hit us up with your comments and let us know how you feel. I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jarrett.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.